nostalgic, is it? What happened, chap? Maybe we have some technical difficulties.
What is going to be your first question?
Bye. Good evening and welcome to Plain Talk. It's my pleasure, Christopher Ram, to have you with me for another hour, and even more importantly, to have three very special guests. They're all from the European Union or the European Investment Bank. On my left is Mr. Derek Lam, who is from the EU office in Guyana. On my immediate right is the Vice President of the European Investment Bank, Pim van Ballycombe. I hope I've got it right, sir.
Perfectly.
And to his right is Mr. Thoris Vermeulen. He's an investment officer, Corporate Lending Division, Global Partner Countries. Gentlemen, welcome to Plain Talk. And welcome to Guyana.
Thank you.
What is your purpose of visit to Guyana at this stage?
Our purpose of the visit is to re-engage and try to be of added value to the country. We started operations in Guyana a long time ago, but the last operation we signed was in 2000, and that is already 16 years ago, so it is long overdue. And we came yesterday morning with a delegation to explore the possibilities to invest in this country.
Well, indeed, just to echo what the Vice President explained, we're here to do business. My role as an investment officer is to look for business opportunities. We combine the visit also with a trip to Suriname, and well, for us it's on the operational side it's fantastic when we can get the Vice President to come visit. It opens all the doors, we get to meet all the important people and advertise and market what we can offer.
Derek, is there anything you want to add on behalf of the European office?
Well, just to mention, I'm part of the European Union delegation that's based here in Guyana. So our role in this visit was to liaise with the officials from the EIB and to help them set up the program and arrange the meetings here in Guyana.
Usually, persons coming to Guyana and Guyanese and the Guyanese government like to talk about development, banking. They like to access low-cost, long-term loans for infrastructural projects. What's the difference between a development bank and an investment bank?
We are an investment bank, but part of our projects do have a development element. But an investment bank is able to concentrate investments in the private sector. If we want to, we are committed to re-engage to Guyana. We have, of course, interest in investments in the public sector, mainly infrastructure. That is needed in order to encourage private investors. If you don't have proper infrastructure facilities, private investors are not inclined to come to the country. But we have a portfolio normally across the board. It is 70% private sector, 30% public sector, and I think that is one of the advantages of the European Investment Bank. And indeed, as you said, we are competitive in pricing. We have longer tenors. We have technical advice and services. We liaise with the European Union for so-called blending facilities, so that is combining grants with loans and guarantees in order to get a better leverage and a more impact to the economy.
Flores, you're an investment officer, corporate lending. What does that entail? What does your job entail?
So the way we're organized at the European Investment Bank is that we have financial expertise and technical expertise in-house. I more or less function as the front office, where I go and meet clients in countries like Guyana and try and market what the EIB can offer. At the moment, I'm actually specialized in corporate lending, private sector, but my role will be changing from January, where I'll be moving to the region in Barbados, and I'll actually be covering all the sectors, which includes microfinance, banking operations, corporate lending, project finance, and of course public sector. When I identify a project, I then engage with my engineering and sector economists, and we give the project a good review. We're financing projects all around the world. We're actually the largest multilateral lender in the world. We financed 80 billion of projects last year. So our engineers and economists are amongst the best in the world to be able to judge if a project is viable, if it's bankable, what are the environmental and social risks, and can also provide advice to the clients on how they can structure the project for the benefit of, effectively in the end, the people of the country.
Derek, I'll bring you in. I just want to get some more
Sure.
details, if you. Now, you said, Mr. Van Welcome, that you were here last in 2000. What?
No, that's
what
not the bank.
No, the bank. In
Yeah.
terms of what was the cause of that gap?
Yes, that I asked. We met several ministers, the Prime Minister, the President, the Minister of Finance, and the Minister of Public Infrastructure, and the Prime Minister, and I asked, why the heck didn't you come back to the bank? Because a client comes back, and if he doesn't come back, something is wrong normally. So,
Or very right, which is unlikely.
Were we too bureaucratic? Were we too expensive? Were we? And I didn't get an answer. So we concluded at the end, we don't look into the past, we look to the future.
But that's a little bit surprising, because the European Union office in Guyana has had a very high profile. They've in fact been financing the lots of projects.
But that's
and
grant
initiatives.
money, huh?
Yes, and that's but why do you think that's been the case? Is it bad marketing on the part of the bank? And you're free to speak plainly on this program.
I don't think it's bad marketing on the part of the bank at all. As you say, the EU does have a long-standing relationship here in Guyana. We have a lot of development cooperation. We're the biggest donor organisation in Guyana, indeed in the world. And our development cooperation with Guyana is through the framework of the Cotonou Agreement, which is an agreement between the European Union and the African, Caribbean and Pacific group of states. So we provide development cooperation through the European Development Fund, which goes in cycles. And in Guyana, a lot of our development cooperation is focused, for example, on sea and river defences. The 10th European Development Fund focused mainly on that, and now we're finalising the 11th European Development Fund, which will run from now until 2020. And that will also focus on integrated coastal zone management, which will be sea and river defences, conservancies, mangrove projects. So we do have a close and long-standing relationship with Guyana. We have been present here for a long time. We intend to be present for a long time to come. And the European Investment Bank is one part of the European Union family. So the fact that they haven't been here doesn't necessarily say anything about, I don't think, about them or about the European Union or our relationship.
Our country, yes. You talk about being the biggest, and both in terms of overall and as a lender in Guyana, or financier in Guyana. What in fact is the capital of the bank, European Investment Bank?
We are, as Flores has just said, since the crisis, that is 2007, our annual volume is around 80 billion euros on lending a year, annual. On our balance sheet there is around 600 billion euros on risks on our balance sheet. We are, although we are the biggest IFI in the world, financial institution, far bigger than the World Bank and all the others together, we are capitalized, not our capital is as a buffer, 20 billion euros. So for our shareholders, it's a big deal that they can have for 20 billion euros on capital and investment
Lending.
portfolio of 600 billion on risks on our balance sheet. And to make things clear, from 80 billion is our average annually, and around 10 to 15% is lent outside the European Union. So that's in between 8 and 10 billion euros a year for ACP, but also, of course, as you can imagine, for countries in our neighborhood, Northern Africa, Turkey, Ukraine, and that sort of countries which have a perspective to join the European Union or are in our neighborhood. Discussions are going on currently. Yesterday, the President of the European Commission, in his State of the Union, announced that we are asked as an institution to even do more in the coming 3 years in the European Union for 350 billion euros extra lending, and for lending outside the European Union for 88 billion euros, which is on top of what we are going to do, what we are doing normally. So that is a great challenge, and that is also the reason probably we are more eager to come to the regions, and that is also one of the reasons why Floris Vermeulen will be in our new office in Barbados as from the 1st of January onwards. So although the bank is a centralized institution, we are more and more present in the region itself and more closer to the clients, also with the idea that it's generating more business.
One of the factors I presume one would take into account, any lender, especially a lender of your magnitude, is some kind of country profile. Is there a view overall of Ghana? It's a good risk, or no, it's not a good risk, so therefore our interest rates have got to be higher to mitigate those.
If you are looking into possibilities to invest in the private sector, of course it's very helpful when the investment climate is welcoming. And discussions made clear, and also reading reports on the economy of Guyana, that macroeconomic policies and the fiscal policies are stable. Inflation is down, is quite low. Reforms are implemented. So from that perspective, I think it is there are quite a lot of investment opportunities in this country. The current government is, in my view, on the right track.
Based on what factors?
As I said, low inflation, good
Overall
fiscal
macroeconomic indicators.
indicators. They are sound. The indicators are sound. The investments, the reforms are implemented. Yesterday or the day before yesterday, we had Guyana had a FATF visit,
Yes.
where they came to the conclusion that things are heading in the right direction, which is confidence building to the private sector, and I think that's the way forward.
How does the perception of corruption affect a lenders and a kind of organization like yours, the lender's view of our country? As you know, we score badly on the question of the transparency, international corruption.
We are very
perception
rigorous.
in it.
We are very rigorous. We have quite a big department, compliance department, to look into those issues in relation to our investments. It happens everywhere, but we try to make sure that our lending is in line with all the international regulations and requirements. Another aspect, and that I think is an advantage of blending and lending, the European Investment Bank never ever finances for more than 100%. We are financing projects for 30, 40 or 50%. So we are always looking for partners to join forces. So we are one or two or three parties in a financial conglomerate to look into the implementation of the project. If you give money as a grant, then it is far harder to make sure that the project is implemented in accordance to the objectives in the contract.
Flores, can I ask you? The Vice President indicates that overall the country, Ghana, is considered satisfactory, at least. That's my word, not yours, sir.
That's a good conclusion. Yeah.
But are there any particular sectors in which the European Investment Bank would be particularly attracted?
Is that for Flores?
Yes.
Okay.
Certainly.
You answer the political questions. He will
Oh,
say.
okay.
And just to complete your earlier question about the perception of corruption indexes, and goes back to what you asked about the difference between a development bank and an investment bank. We finance projects. We finance physical assets. We finance against invoices. When we provide loans, we know that we monitor it's being built, and we don't disperse unless we have the invoices to prove that something's being put up. We have procurement guidelines which require transparency and international competitive bidding. This is for our reputation, and it's also our calling card. We only want to get involved in good projects because that in the long term is why people will want to work with us, as well as our long tenor funding and our good interest rates. It's the fact that we offer quality. Now, the sectors that interest us, and this is, we'd like to thank our hosts, the EU delegation, and also all the meetings we've had with the various our counterparts, private and public sector, that we've been given a very clear message about the priorities that Guyana is facing. Our takeaways are where we could play a useful role, also complementing the other DFIs or IFIs active in the country, is that energy is important, looking at renewable energy and greening the economy. Transport links are critical, developing the port infrastructure so that Guyana can become a conduit for goods coming out of the north of Brazil, and also to develop Georgetown in readiness for the very likely oil and gas activities that are coming up. And then finally, there was a lot of talk about how to improve lending for small businesses, which is always a challenge because it really depends on the risk appetite of the local banks that we would work with. But those are things that we will keep discussing. At the moment now, we received some very useful information from our counterparts. We'll, like I said, we'll take it back, we'll digest it, and then we'll start the engagement process to develop those projects and start our due diligence.
In addition to that, you asked to have a political appreciation. The priorities Flores mentioned were 3 or 4 main investment possibilities. And throughout our visit, from the President to the Prime Minister, from the Prime Minister to the Minister of Public Infrastructure, everyone we discussed re-engagement. The Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister, they have all 5 came forward with the same priorities. So the visit was well prepared from the side of the government. There was no light between one minister and the other, which was to me quite remarkable.
You did a good job there.
Thank
Coordinating.
you very much. I think the government, though, can claim the credit for that.
Now, the range of your portfolio, the basket, you started by talking micro. So what would be the minimum kind of loan? Or how do you get into micro? Is it through a financial institution or some
Depends.
intermediary?
Depends on the project, of course. We can do direct lending to corporates and mid caps. When they are more inclined also to do that when they are very innovative or research oriented. If it's investments below 5 million dollars or euros, we can also lend them in local currency. Then we operate via intermediary banks in the country itself. Either the private financial institutions or the public financial institutions, or one of the issues we discussed as well, the government is considering to establish a national promotional or national development bank, and then we operate via credit lines. So we put a credit line to the development bank, and then they lend it on to the smaller and medium-sized enterprises.
Let's see if we could, if I can get a little bit more specific, for example, perhaps, what's the minimum that the kind of loan you'll be looking at?
As the Vice President explained, if we're dealing with the microfinance, for instance, we had a very interesting discussion with some private sector counterparts and with the government about the need to transition and diversify away from sugar. And help sugar, number one, become competitive in the industry, and secondly, to help farmers also diversify their income streams. Now, in this case, a microfinance product would be ideal, where we would identify a robust and sound microfinance institution that's active in the country. We would provide them with funding, either in local currency or in dollars, likely in local currency, because we don't want to put them into a risky situation with their foreign exchange risks. And they would then, having a network locally, work with what would then be farmers in that case, or it could be in another instance small businesses in towns or in rural communities, and the loans can be as small as they choose. It could be a few $100 at a time. It could be a few thousand. It really depends on the needs and the organization we're dealing with. When we work with the commercial banks supporting SMEs and mid-cap enterprises, as the VP said, the commercial bank could even lend up to 5 million euros for an individual loan. Now, I understand, depending on the size of the economy, that could already be a very large amount. And in that sense, we really try and cater for the needs of the situation where we are. We don't come with pre-described ideas. We try and listen and understand what the needs are and fit to that. And we can be quite flexible.
We are client and country oriented.
And just to mention, sorry, for the direct operations, when we have the direct relationship with a corporate client, or if we're dealing with a sovereign operation, a public sector investment, then we can go to very large amounts. We've already mentioned the kind of financing we do in Europe, so that really depends on the debt sustainability factors, the size of the project, and the amount of co-financiers involved. What we like to do is work together with delegation who have the grants. This is what we refer to blending. There's also regional grants available. We'll try and get hold of some of those to, in fact, make our financing even more attractive by combining the grants with the loans in the form of technical assistance or even a reduced interest rate.
Okay, interest rate. Now, in Guyana, interest rates have been stubbornly high. If
We know the
there we
question.
go again.
if you wanted to break that, you would find yourselves competing with the local financial institutions. How have you tried to think through that challenge?
We are not in the market to crowd out the private sector.
Okay.
We are in the market to crowd in.
Mm-hmm.
The financial sector in Guyana is quite liquid.
But still,
but
still, it has very high interest rates, which is something
quite
of a
liquid,
paradox.
But as I was told, but it's not new because we have this a similar phenomenon in Europe. Banking sector, due to regulations, is probably not always willing to lend it out. So the risk taking is a problem, and I think with the help of the European Investment Bank, we can encourage those banks to lend it to the sector. Otherwise,
I don't quite understand. If they're not lending now, how can the European Investment Bank persuade them?
because then we can share risks. And I think that is that ultimately can encourage investors to come to a bank and to implement investment projects.
And you think that sharing of that risk will persuade them to?
That's the way it
lower
works.
their-
That's the way it works in other countries. So when we are doing direct lending, as I said, we never do 100%. So we're always trying to find other partners to join forces. And as said by Floris Vermeulen earlier, our technical expertise and advisory services are well known. So sometimes when the European Investment Bank is willing to lend to a certain project, the commercial sector is inclined to come and join forces as well. It is for them, it is a quality stamp that we are involved, and that is the reason why we only want to have quality on our balance sheet. Otherwise, the credit rating agencies will question our AAA status if there is no quality on our balance sheet. But it is also needed to encourage the private sector to join in an investment program.
What's your typical interest rate in a typical
How long is
developing country?
How long is a piece of string?
I know. I'm still trying to get an answer from you.
You got
It's impossible.
No, but you must.
Let
I
me
mean,
put it
you
this
have
way.
actual rates.
Let me put it this way:
Yeah.
we are AAA rated.
Yes.
We're not profit motivated. We're motivated by the impact we can have
in the country.
through our financing in the country where we're active. It's our intention to pass through the financial benefit of our own cheap funding to our clients. We will, in the case where we're co-financing, we might align with another development finance institution. We're not here to distort the market or undercut the market. We have risk pricing like any other bank, but we tend to be quite competitive. In the case that we have a project with a specific environmental benefit or a renewable energy project, we can also provide subsidies. In that case, we can become very attractive. And why do we do that? Because it's an absolute priority for us in the European Union to support the transition to sustainable energy and the protection of environment and biodiversity.
You still haven't answered my question.
No. But you
No,
know,
no. But I'm asking, what is your typical interest
no,
rate?
there is no typical.
Yeah,
There
okay.
is no typical interest rate. If you have a public operation
Hmm.
with the guarantee of the state, there's a totally different pricing than when there is a private investment.
So would that go
depends on the
more like
collateral.
development rate for development institution then? In the public sector, if it's infrastructure?
I think we are an investment bank. As Floor said, sometimes there is a possibility for interest subsidies or blending facilities, which adds on to the attractiveness of the bank. But each and every project is analyzed by us via a very thorough due diligence process. And let's say we are agreeing on a specific operation. public sector
Mhm.
infrastructure operation. We struck a deal of, let's say, 20 million euros today,
Mhm.
and the government is asking for disbursements in 3 or 4 years' time. I'm not able to predict what the economic situation is in 4 years, so we cannot tell you what is the fixed interest rate. Depends on collateral, on risks. We are the higher the risks, if it's a junior loan or a senior loan, if it's a participation in a bank, in a development bank, which is a totally other different product, and or a grant. We also do grants. So, but it, I said, there we go again. It's each and everyone is always asking, what is the interest rate? I can tell you the interest rate next year when we sign a concrete deal. Then I can say, for this specific project, we charge LIBOR plus 3%.
And apart from the interest rate, maybe the more important question is, what is the tenor?
Yeah.
Mhm.
If you're financing public infrastructure with an economic life of 30 or 40 years, we will try and extend the tenor of a loan as much as possible. In the
Yeah.
case of public sector operations, often 20, 25 years to
Yeah.
repay. Now, I don't think anyone, and the World Bank has different funding envelopes depending on the status of the country they're operating in. I don't know IDB's, Inter-American Development Bank's pricing, but in those cases, I mean, we're attractive. We finance projects all around the world. I mean, 10 billion outside of Europe last year, which a third is the public sector. That's not because we're expensive. It's because people like working with us.
Then another example is that of crowding in.
Mhm.
You said, are you competing with the private sector? The private sector in this country, but in any other country, never does loans for more than 5, 6 or 7 years. We are investing, for instance, in one of the ports in the Netherlands, where we do 27 years, and the commercial sector does 7 years.
Mhm.
So we are not a competitor because they don't have the products we are offering.
But in respect of those that your private sector lending is more similar, whether you're in the private
It
sector.
will.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
That's true.
The European Investment Bank is more than likely a tax exempt kind of institution.
Yep.
If you were to lend here, and you
One
have
one of the reasons that would be unfair when we are pushing out the private sector out of the market. Yeah.
So here you are. You say you're not competing, but you have an unfair advantage. Because the other institutions, or lending
Yeah.
institutions,
But
have to pay taxes.
you have to approach that from a different angle.
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine that there are investment opportunities or very needed infrastructure developments which are not realized without our support.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably unfair, but due to the fact that the European Investment Bank is interested in that infrastructure project, has the consequence that it is realized earlier, because sometimes the project will be realized, but in the long run, it is either no investment without our interference than an investment. So that is, in that sense, not unfair. We are trying to bridge financial gaps, in order to make sure that the investment will happen ultimately. I have several examples that we are asked to look into the project. We have, for instance, we were asked to finance a lock. We did our due diligence process. We put effort in the whole process, and ultimately there was sufficient interest from the private sector to do it without the European Investment Bank. So be it.
Job done.
Huh?
Job done.
Yeah, job done. Some of our people in the bank are frustrated because they put a lot of effort into this project, and ultimately they don't have, they are not asked to participate in the financing of the project. But then I'm quite blunt and straightforward, and you said, then you have to go to the commercial sector. You are working for a public institution, and if the private sector can realize this investment without our support, the better it is. The better it is.
Derek, is this team going to be meeting the Guyana Association of Bankers there?
No,
Has
but
that
they
been
did
on?
meet with quite a few representatives of the banking sector here in Guyana. There was the European Union ambassador hosted a dinner last night, at which quite a few senior members of the private sector were present, and they had the opportunity to meet the vice president and his team.
One of the words mentioned earlier is bureaucracy or bureaucratic, and given the importance of maintaining your AAA rating, complying and with all the disclosure and transparency rules.
You have visited
How
us.
do you? Sorry.
You have visited us.
Yeah. How long does it take?
How
for an
long?
oper-
How
Yeah.
long does it take to turn around to get a loan, just from application to disbursement? What kind of record do you have?
My
I know
record
you
is
don't like the word typical. I
No, no,
realize
no.
that, but what does it?
My
take?
record is 6 weeks
6 weeks.
for 300 million euros.
But that's probably an old-time record.
That's
to
an
put into context.
but that is typically a question.
Now we use the word.
No. That is typically a question you cannot answer. The 6 weeks was a client we know already for more than 20 years,
Okay.
and the product.
Can't be typical at all.
No, and the product was a known product for us and that bank.
Mm.
So, want to be disobedient, but it was more or less copy paste because we know the institution, they know us, we know the product, so that was an easy thing to do. If you are talking huge public infrastructure, is a month or 2 months or 3 months or 4 months more really a hurdle? No, because those projects
More than
on average, I told and promised the ministers we spoke yesterday and today that I'll be back in the country next year to try to conclude 2 or 3 contracts. So depends also on the preparedness of the other side. If there is a good business plan, a good investment plan, then it is easier for us to appraise such a specific investment proposal. It all depends on the counterparty.
I'm particularly interested in the private sector because the platitude about engine of growth, but it is
That's the-
important.
that's
You don't
the-
want a massive state that earns no revenue. Someone approaches the bank. Well, first of all, where do they go? Who do they meet? What kind of documentation is required? What kind of visits by the bank?
I can briefly describe the process.
Sure, please.
Just to give an idea. So, for instance, imagine now we're visiting and we have the opportunity through the kind generosity of the delegation that were hosting us. We met some very interesting counterparts. One of them might say, "Listen, I have a project. This is it." Well, I say this. All right. First of all, in my mind, I'm thinking, is it eligible? Is it a priority sector for us? Is it eligible? What are the potential risks? If he would say, I want to grow tobacco and create a cigar industry in Guyana, unfortunately, it will not be eligible because we can't finance tobacco. But most other sectors, we can find a way. There are a few which are tricky, but like I mentioned before, anything to do with renewable energy, transport, agriculture, and even social sectors like education and health.
Social housing.
Social housing. So at that stage, I'll try and find a bit of information and say, all right, send me what you have. Do you have a business plan? Have you done a feasibility study? Do you have any designs? What's the status of any environmental social...
So implicit in those questions are that you're telling the persons, look, you have to go and get these things.
Maybe we need to take a step back. Whenever anyone would approach a bank, they need to have pretty clear idea of what they're trying to achieve and what the bank is going to be financing.
They usually have it only in their heads in this place.
What-
They usually only have it in their heads.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
But
so
it should be also on paper.
I know.
yeah. So this is the first thing we'll need to ask for it. Why? Because we need to know the level of preparedness. The homework needs to be done, and I need to be able to give something to my colleagues back in Luxembourg to review, and they'll see pretty much instantly the level of quality of the project. I've had the benefit of meeting the person. I'll have an idea of their capacity. What kind of team do they have? Do they have the right engineering expertise? Do they have a track record? Is it a greenfield? Is it an expansion from an existing operation? All these things fit into the equation about how likely it is that we're going to be able to help this counterpart and the timelines involved. Now, my colleagues might say, listen, this is a great project. This is really what we're trying to achieve. They're going to put up solar power or who knows what. At that stage, they might say, but listen, we do need an environmental impact assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the private sector counterpart might say, listen, it's not required under law. I wasn't aware of this. We'll say, you work with the EIB, you have to prepare this. So, send us here's the terms of reference. We can help you design. Let us know who you want to work with. We'll review early drafts. But this is an important step of our process. It could be the financial model. It could be the question of co-financing. Because if we're going to finance up to 30-40% of a project, we'll say, what's the financing plan? Do you have equity? Do you have a co-financing bank? Who could we work with? There's a myriad of questions, and this process can take 3 months or it can take 18 months. And it won't matter how long it takes because we want to engage with the project when it's ready, when it's mature. When we're ready, when I can present it to my hierarchy and say, this is a good project for the IB. It fits the eligibility criteria. We're offering value here, which is not otherwise available through long tenor financing, through our expertise, maybe through some technical assistance. It's in line with the EU priorities for the country. It's in line with our legal framework, the Cotonou Agreement, as far as the eligible sectors are concerned, and the project is decent quality. Now, at that stage, we can sign a finance contract and work towards disbursement.
You will be based in Barbados. Now, what presence are you going to have in Guyana? Is it the European office, the delegation's office?
We will assist in any way we can, but Floris will be based in Barbados, and I understand he will visit Guyana as and when needed. Also, it's quite possible that other colleagues from Luxembourg could come out to appraise projects as well.
And by the way, our office in Barbados is in the premises of the EU delegation. We always want to be near to our family.
Okay.
There's also an efficient way of because in countries where we don't have an office, we are always supported by the EU delegation in our organizing this visit. For instance, they are quite instrumental. But also when loan officers are flying in from Luxembourg, they always liaise with the EU delegation.
One of the challenges borrowers have in Guyana, I think that's true of many of the countries in the Caribbean, is the question of adequacy of security. What kind of security would they, and again I'm talking private sector, particularly because the government of course has sovereign debt and all of that.
Sovereign debt and
The private sector. What kind of security you'd be looking for?
It really varies. If we're dealing with a bank, a leading bank in the country, we'll often sign a contract on what we call a single signature basis. We will rely on the local rule of law to protect us in the case that the bank would default. And banking also being a regulated industry, that helps us a lot. If we're dealing with, say, a corporate client, we would look at the assets that we're financing, very likely a pledge of assets, sometimes a pledge of shares in the company. We could, in any case, we would get the advice of the co-financing bank with us, who would in some cases be a local commercial bank or an international financial institution with a local presence that knows the market, and local legal counsel. Of course, we want to secure our position, but if we've done our homework properly, hopefully we should never get to the situation that we need to call the security either.
That's always
But
the hope. That's always the vain hope of a lender.
sometimes we have an airplane on offer,
Okay.
because that was collateral in one of the.
Oh, really?
Now-
But it was sold.
It was so.
Yeah.
Now the
Direct to TMR sold.
the European Union takes positions on certain issues.
Mhm.
They may even call it principled issues. Sexual countries that have the death penalty, countries that may be not high up in human rights, countries that are not particularly liberal or progressive in sexual orientation. Does any one of those things, or do all of them, impact on the European Investment Bank decision as to whether or not it should
That is,
have a role in a
we
country?
are a financial institution. We are not a political institution. We have 28 shareholders. That is the 28 member states of the
20
Europe.
who have taken a position and say the death penalty, though.
That doesn't. No, they. For instance, the 28 shareholders of the European Investment Bank, and they gather in the Council of the European Union, came to the conclusion that we are not able to lend to Russia, because that is there is a boycott to Russia. Then we are not appreciating that. That's how the political masters decided. A couple of years ago, they decided to not to lend anymore to Fiji because there was a coup d'état over there. Now we are open again on Fiji, and things are heading in the right direction. But it is up to our shareholders, to the Council of Ministers, in close cooperation with the European Commission and the Parliament, to decide where we can lend and where we are not able to operate.
And if I could add to that, from the perspective of the EU delegation, the development cooperation funding that I mentioned earlier on is one element of our work. But we recognise that issues such as those you mentioned, the death penalty, LGBT issues, they are sovereign issues that Guyana itself has to decide on. And our development cooperation funding to this country will not be affected by that. Whatever Guyana decides to do or not do is for Guyana. We will encourage them, we will liaise with our partners here, we will try and encourage issues that we feel are priorities for us, such as the death penalty. But Guyana's decision ultimately is for Guyana.
The Europe
Europe.
is likely to have quite a seminal development with the UK triggering Article 50.
Mhm.
What impact do you see? What significance do you see in that? And then we'll talk about what might be the consequences.
Now, the United Kingdom is a shareholder of the bank.
Mhm.
Around 16% of the shares are UK shares. What is going to happen with Brexit is unknown. Article 50 is not triggered. I read an article in the Financial Times this evening that the House of Lords is insisting that a decision has to be put to Parliament before it is the Prime Minister is able to trigger Article 50. It's all speculation now.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as our political masters in Brussels don't come to the conclusion how Brexit will be implemented, the bank will continue the lending operations in the country. It is a shareholder who is very dedicated to the bank, brings quality and quality operations to the bank. It's good for our balance sheet and the risk profile of the bank. It even could be possible that the United Kingdom can remain shareholder. It depends on the decisions taken by the ministers. If they are going to leave the Union, and if the 27 other member states come to the conclusion that it is not able to remain shareholder in the bank, I'm pretty sure that the bank can continue operations under a mandate. We are operating outside the European Union in around 120 countries, so we also can operate in 121 countries. But that will be different. But it's pure speculation what's going to happen.
Well, let me put it to the bank. I notice you're deflecting some of the questions are going in your direction, or you're taking them. When on the morning after, one got the impression of this feeling, oh my God, what have we done, and what do we do now? Is that true of the European Investment Bank as a consequence, that it did not think, well, okay, because you're talking long term. Did you think, and did you factor in the possible consequences of Brexit?
You're asking me?
I'm asking any one of you.
We were well prepared.
You are.
Yeah. We prepared our treasury, of course, and our funding department on the possible consequences of a Brexit vote. What consequences had to the capital markets, because we have to fund ourselves on the capital markets. So in that sense, we were prepared. Personally, I was taken by surprise, but that's another thing. And what ultimately is going to happen, next time you have to have a crystal ball here, and then we'll look into that. I think that when Article 50 is triggered, if it will be triggered, it takes at least until the end of 2019 before the definitive conclusion is reached on the way we operate in the future.
Of course, in some ways, that only prolongs the uncertainty, because if for example, no agreement is reached within that 2 years of Article 50 being triggered, then everything is off.
But the uncertainty, from my operational perspective,
There's no
uncertainty, and I think I can say the same for my colleagues that work in Western Europe. I have my job to do. We need to look for good projects. We need to finance good projects. We need to have impact as much as possible, and that's going to keep going. And if the political process takes longer or not, our colleagues. We have a lot of British colleagues. The first thing our president did was to confirm to everyone that the bank will respect all its agreements and all its contracts. So everyone knew, okay, we're not going to be left out in the cold if eventually the UK does decide to exit its shareholding, which is still completely unknown. And it's for us, we just want to go do our business. There's still companies out there, projects that need financing. If there's any uncertainty, I'm maybe in a privileged position that it's not going to affect my work. I mean, I don't have to take the difficult,
You'll be Barbados.
complex stuff. Well, especially, but even in Luxembourg, you know, we're operational.
Well, what it's 16% you said of the
Yeah,
capital
right.
is.
It's 16.8%,
Yeah.
I think.
What is your exposure, your loan exposure to the UK now?
Last year we had a record volume in the United Kingdom, and that was around 7 billion euros annually. But what our exposure is,
Maybe that times 5 or 6. I
yeah,
guess.
I think so.
Please don't quote me, but I expect somewhere
Yeah.
between 40, around 35,
Yeah.
40 billion.
But
And-
that,
and-
but that is those contracts are serviced even after Brexit. They are going to be served because it is
Subject, of course, to
to
the pound sterling interest rates and all of these factors. They can be
Yeah.
served, but there are serious risks. There are implications. Anyway, I don't want to hold you too much on
no.
Brexit.
I go.
But I
Everyone
want to give
was
you.
shocked. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just being signaled that we've got about 90 seconds more. I don't know if there's anything.
Now, one thing I would like to underline.
Yes, please
because
do.
2 or 3 journalists asked me the question: does it have any impact of our lending operations in this region? And the clear answer is no. It doesn't have any impact for lending in the region, nor is it of any impact for our lending operations in the future in Guyana.
And in terms of the region, and now that you have come back into Guyana, is there a sum, for example, that you're thinking that look in this region, and Flores will be, his task will be to try and get 30 billion out in 3 years. Is there such a plan? Is there such a?
Well, it depends. We're not here to push money into the market. We want to find the good projects where we can add value and finance those. Now, I've been given my instructions by my vice president, 2 or 3 contracts next year. So I'll be back. We have the leads. I mean, I'd like to thank. We'd like to thank the great meetings we've had. We've been here, all the wonderful people we've met, and well, we're very motivated to make it happen.
Well, let me-
He's a loan officer and a diplomat, isn't he?
and you're the diplomat and the politician. And Derek, I want to say a special thank you for making this
Thank you.
program.
For us in the delegation,
evening.
it's very exciting to have this visit from the European Investment Bank. We think there'll be lots of investment and financing opportunities here, and we see this as a sign of the European Union's commitment to Guyana.
So,
Indeed.
gentlemen, I do want to say thank you so very much for appearing on this program. It's been a useful discussion. I want to say, operators and viewers, thank you, good night, see you next week.
Okay.
Thanks very much.